the Honorable Ambassador Herman J. Cohen. Herman J. Cohen spent 38 years in the United States Foreign Service, specializing in African affairs. He served as the American ambassador in Africa and held several high positions in the Department of State, including Assistant Secretary of State for Africa during the Bush administration in 1989 through 1993. During that period, he was very involved in the resolution of civil wars in a number of African countries and integrated the first democracy support program in Africa funded by the United States government. Following his retirement from the State Department, Mr. Cohen joined the Global Coalition for Africa as a senior advisor, specializing in promotion of democracy and good governance in African countries. After 5 years with GCA, Mr. Cohen established his own consulting firm, Cohen & Woods International, specializing in building business links between private sector operators in the United States and Africa. Mr. Cohen's book on conflict resolution in Africa, Intervening a Superpower Peacemaking in Troubled Continent, was cited for distinguished writing on diplomacy by the American Academy of Diplomacy during the year 2000. Without further ado, welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Abdi. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I was very honored when you called on me, on this retired old guy, to come and talk about the Horn. I guess in Somalia I'd be an elder. That's right. But I must say I learned so much since this meeting started about Ogaden. I must say I was not very well educated about the Ogaden. And I think if someone like me, who follows international affairs so closely every day, knows so little about the Ogaden, can you imagine what policymakers and other people know about it? So I think you have a big job to do to educate people about what's going on. And also these discussions brought back so many memories for me, talking about how the Ogaden became part of Ethiopia reminded me about Eritrea. Because in 1990 I was asked to become the mediator between the Eritrean People's Liberation Front and the Derg. And so I asked my staff to do some research on how did Eritrea become part of Ethiopia. And we found that after the Second World War, Eritrea was a protectorate of the United Nations. And the United Nations General Assembly decided to make a confederation between Ethiopia and Eritrea, which started in 1952. And a confederation means you have two equal partners. So Eritrea was 95% independent, and except for foreign policy and the currency was the same for both countries. But and this was fine. Everybody liked that. They had their own parliament, their own police, they made their own laws. But in 1962, the emperor was persuaded to annex Eritrea. And the way they did that is they went to parliament and they asked the Eritrean parliament to accept annexation while the Eritrean army had guns through the window while they were voting, you see. So this was not a free and fair selection by the Eritrean people, and this started the Eritrean civil war for Eritrean independence. And it reminded me a lot about how Ogaden became part. So we decided at that point in the State Department that the people of Eritrea had the right to decide whether they should be self-governing or they wanted to stay in Ethiopia. So that was the part of the peace process. We insisted that the Eritrean people be given the right of self-determination, which was contrary to all U.S. policy about being against secession in Africa. But I made that decision because of the historical record, you see. And also we're talking about, Fauzia mentioned that the people of Ogaden did not quite understand about the TPLF. How are they different from the Derg? There wasn't much change as far as they were concerned. Well, I remember 1995, when I was with the Global Coalition for Africa, I was visiting Addis at least twice a year. And in 1995, I went to see a friend of mine who was a professor at the University of Addis. And I said, I'm reaching the conclusion that the TPLF government is not different from the Derg. Would you agree with that? And he says, yes, I agree with you. I said, well, why is that? We had so much hope. He said, Ethiopia cannot be governed in any other way. So I was a little astonished of that, but this is from a professor at the university. And he did not like the TPLF, but that was his conclusion. And finally,